WION correspondent abducted, detained, assaulted. WION's Anas Mallick held for 21 hours at an unknown location. Blindfolded and handcuffed by Taliban fighters. Targeted for reporting attack on Al-Qaeda chief. Anas Mallick's Kabul associates still in custody. Assault on WION correspondent exposes Taliban 2.0.
We were handcuffed, we were blindfolded, we were hurled accusations of the most wildest in nature.
Watch Anas Mallick narrate his experience in Taliban custody. Only on Gravitas, tonight, 9 p.m. IST.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
We were handcuffed, we were blindfolded, we were hurled.
It's been a long day for us at WION. My colleague Anas Mallick was in Afghanistan. He's a Pakistan bureau chief, but also holds fort for us in Afghanistan. He's been at the forefront of tracking the Taliban takeover. He spent months in the country, in the run-up and the aftermath of the fall of the Afghan government. So it was only natural that we sent him again as the Taliban complete 1 year in power. He was there to take stock, to chronicle the lives of ordinary Afghans, to see what has changed in this Taliban regime. Unfortunately, he became the story of what has not changed. What he went through in the last 24 hours is proof that there is no Taliban 2.0. They abducted a reporter for doing his job. We're happy to tell you that Anas was released earlier today. He's now back home safe. But his associates are not. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you the full story.
Denial or confirmation whether it was Ayman al-Zawahiri, we're yet to hear from them.
Taliban 2.0. How many times did we hear those words last year? A changed Taliban, a modern Taliban. Some even called it a reformed Taliban. Well, tonight we have news for all those people. There is no Taliban 2.0. It is the same group of regressive and radicalized men. They oppose rights for women. They harbor and promote terrorism. They persecute minorities. And they despise free and independent press. On that last one, we have first-hand experience now. If you're active on Twitter, you may already know what I'm talking about. WION's correspondent Anas Mallick went missing in Kabul yesterday. We tried texting him, we tried his phone numbers, no luck. Nobody had any clue where he was. We also reached out to the hotel where he was staying. Turns out, Anas never returned. At that point, we knew that something was wrong. Our office reached out to the Pakistani embassy in New Delhi. We also contacted the Taliban's foreign office. Everyone in the newsroom was tense. After all, this was Afghanistan, not exactly friendly territory for any journalist, let alone a foreign reporter. And we were right. Anas was picked up by the Taliban around Thursday afternoon. He was dragged out of his vehicle. He was blindfolded and handcuffed. And he was held for 21 hours at an unknown location. They gave him no reason, no judicial order, not even a chance to use his mobile phone. You can imagine how terrifying it was. Anas will join us on the show in a couple of minutes from now, and we will hear directly from him about what happened in custody. But before that, let's dissect this entire episode. Here you have a reporter, a foreign correspondent, who is accredited by the government. His papers are in order. He has got all the permissions. He's on the road filming what we call generic visuals. It's pretty innocuous stuff, like a few cars or a building or a market. And out of nowhere, he gets picked up by a Taliban patrol. He's held without cause. He's physically assaulted, even accused of being a foreign spy. What does that tell you about the Taliban regime, this regime in Kabul? Can we even call it a regime? This incident may have happened to our reporter, but it sums up 1 year of the Taliban rule. In fact, that's why Anas was in Kabul in the first place, to report on the first anniversary of the Taliban's takeover. The Kabul he landed in was tense. Last Sunday, the US carried out a drone strike in the city. They killed Al-Qaeda chief Ayman al-Zawahiri. Anas actually visited that building. He drove through the locality and sent us these pictures. Take a look. Is this why the Taliban was targeting him? Or was it just a random patrol acting out of place? Either way, the Taliban owe us answers. They owe his family answers. Imagine what it was like for them. Anas Mallick's brother Hassan tweeted this out today. He requested the Pakistan Foreign Office to get involved. Soon social media was abuzz with the news. Opposition leaders in Pakistan were talking about Anas. Journalists, activists, government officials, everyone was concerned. But the Taliban could not care less, it seems. They were busy interrogating and assaulting an accredited journalist. First, they accused him of being a Pakistani spy, then of being an Indian spy, and finally of being a CIA spy. This level of incompetence would be funny if we did not know the backstory. The fact is, the Taliban have not changed. They did the same things in the 1990s. They're doing the same things in 2022. In fact, I have some numbers for you. 160 former government officials killed, 173 media workers assaulted, make that 174 after today, 700 civilians killed in armed conflict, 0 girls in high schools and colleges, and dozens of terror attacks by the Islamic State. This is the Taliban's 1-year track record. Exclusion, persecution, and bloodshed. How is this different from the first Taliban regime? Yes, this time they tweet out their official statements. Last time, they had no smartphones. Other than that, where is the difference? The first Taliban regime protected Al-Qaeda chief Osama bin Laden. This regime protected his successor, Ayman al-Zawahiri. The West may have announced sanctions to hurt the Taliban, but their leaders are not bothered. The sanctions are hurting the people, not the regime. Just think about it. If the Taliban was concerned about global perception, would they abduct a journalist? Would they assault him? The Taliban know they can get away with such excesses. Why? Because the world lets them. In this case, our reporter Anas Mallick was lucky. The pressure campaign was enough to get him released. He's back home safely in Islamabad. But his Kabul associates are not. Both his driver and his translator are still in Taliban custody, last we checked. Until they're released, this is not over. And now, let's hear from Anas Mallick himself. He's joining us from Islamabad. I'm sure he's tired after what he's been through in the last 2 days. But his story is one that must be told. Anas, good evening. It's very good to see you safe and sound. How are you doing? And has the experience sunk in yet? I'd like you to share with our viewers, what were your thoughts when you took the flight out of Kabul this afternoon?
Well, thank you so much, everyone, Palki, back the viewers as well, back in India, all over the world, for reaching out, for tweeting, for texting. I've been overwhelmed with the tweets, with the messages, and thanks to WION, thanks to everyone back at office as well, for being there like a rock solid, right behind me, backing me and putting the pressure on the Taliban authorities. The experience is yet to sink in, to be very honest, because I'm still going through that mental trauma or the ordeal, because still not over. I mean, a moment back, I was on the phone. I got a location to be at another colleague's bureau and for lunch, and just in seconds, within 10 or probably less than that, in a snap, everything just changes. You're intercepted. The driver is out of the car. Your phones are taken away. I mean, it felt like a bad dream, to be very honest. But to the last part of your question, when I was leaving Kabul, I was very emotional. There was an Afghan family right next to me, and they said, "We saw you on TV, and we were reading about your reports you were missing." I couldn't hold back my tears at that point of time. I said, "I really love this country. But unfortunately, the regime over here right now is not what you can regard as humans. And what has happened is tragic. I would love to come back, but not in these conditions." And I was given a hug by that family, because Afghanistan is, despite of being a neighbor, it is something that remains close to my heart on a very personal note. I was sent for the first time in 2018 by WION in September 2018, and since then it's almost been a yearly affair that I have to be there. I have been there in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 until the run-up of the fall, and even now. So it's something that's very close, that's very that you connect to. But the last part of your question, I'm still yet to fully get over the fact that this happened. The assault was this extreme. I still have bruises on the back of my ear, on the back of my left ear, on my back, on my hip. I mean, literally all over the body. It's something that you'd never expect for an accredited journalist, for an international journalist, for somebody who has been known to the Taliban as well, because we were there. We were the only Indian network in Kabul to be at the time of the fall of Kabul, and we were there extensively 3 months post takeover. So I was literally at all the press conferences, at all the background briefings, meet the press, you name it. And despite of all of this, this happened. So it was honestly a very, very, very bad dream. Palki?
I can imagine, and what you've gone through, Anas, is trauma. It will take time for you to heal, both physically and mentally, and we can only wish you more strength. You travel the length and breadth of Afghanistan, like you just told our viewers that you've been going there almost every year for the past few years. You've reported extensively during the very volatile transition last year, and thankfully nothing untoward happened. So what do you think changed this time?
I think there's more to do with this security fear, the Taliban fear of being shown or not, or rather being shown the side that they do not want to be projected. When you go for the accreditation, you are given a long lecture on don'ts and media ethics. In fact, I was given one such lecture yesterday as well during my interrogation, as I would say, on what are the ethics of media. I mean, I still do not know the reasons of why I was picked up, because if it was to do with any footage, that matter was actually cleared up within seconds. But particularly if I talk to you, this is much to do with that fear that they think that they will be exposed if there is truly a free press, if there is truly free reportage from there. And that's why we've been seeing, last week we saw Lynn O'Donnell being picked up and being forced to tweet something, the FP columnist, and this week it was me, and next week it could be from somebody from the other networks. But as journalists, we have a responsibility to tell the truth. We've always advocated at WION, be our coverage from Afghanistan or Ukraine, that we have to tell the story and not be our story ourselves. In my 7 years, this is unfortunately the first time that this time it is me who is the story, and I'm not telling somebody's story, and that is something that is truly tragic, at least on a personal note. Palki?
I can understand, Anas. I'm sure you made many friends in Afghanistan. The kind of outpour of support that we saw across borders, across the journalistic fraternity, both in India, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, was testimony to what you've done as a journalist. What is your advice for reporters, for journalists who are still in Afghanistan, many of whom reached out to us, like I said, to ask about you? What would you say to them?
Well, I would rather tell them to hold their ground, to report what they have to, and to be firm, to stand firm, because the truth has to be spoken. The truth has to get out. We all have a bigger responsibility on our own shoulders, and I'm truly indebted to all of those journalists, to all of the people, be that from Pakistan, Afghanistan, or India, elsewhere. Realistically speaking, I'm indebted to all of them for all their efforts to ensure that I was out safe, and it is because of all of the collective efforts, especially thanks to WION and then the Pakistani government as well. The Pakistani embassy got involved, but by and large it was because of all of this because of all of this emotion and their output for me, for the work that we have been doing at WION, is a reflection that I'm standing here in one piece, though badly bruised, but I still pray for the safety of our local producer Zakaria and our driver Mallick, though both who are still in custody of the Taliban. They say that they will be released by Sunday. If I just compare the amount of physical assault, they'd be having 75%, and I was subjected to 25% if we were to do it out of 100, and that is what it is realistically. I pray for them, I pray for their families, and I just hope that they should not be, and they would not be rather be subjected to any more harsh torture or any more assault, and rather they would be able to walk free as free humans, as free Afghans very, very soon. Palki?
Yes, we all hope that, Anas, and I'm going to leave it at that, but I want to say very well done. We're all proud of you, and more power to you. For the moment, we'll shift our attention to another battleground, the Taliban Strait. China is going ballistic. It continues to punish Taiwan for hosting Nancy Pelosi. Here is the latest. These missiles are now literally flying over Taiwan, and China is expected to continue doing this till Sunday. With each passing day, they're raising the stakes. First, the military moves, now an economic strike. Today, China sanctioned Nancy Pelosi. It snapped diplomatic engagement with the United States. The Taiwan Strait has been militarized. What will Xi Jinping do next? That's what we'll discuss tonight. How China's plan for Taiwan is shaping up. First, the latest from the Chinese drills. Earlier this week, Beijing launched a range of operations. The Chinese military has encircled Taiwan. Rockets are now flying in every direction. Look at this map. This is Taiwan. There are 6 danger zones around the islands. We've been showing this to you every day now. This is where the PLA is conducting drills. Missiles are flying from the mainland, and they're landing in every corner. A few missiles went over Taiwan. They landed in Japan's Executive Economic Zone, or what they call the EEZ. Now, this area, the EEZ, falls in Japan's jurisdiction. Think of it as Japan's sovereign territory. And Chinese missiles landed there. Tokyo has released an assessment. It says at least 5 missiles have landed in Japan's EEZ. And this, by the way, is the biggest ever military operation around Taiwan. Chinese bombers and fighter jets are in the air. Warships around Taiwan are conducting strikes. Chinese soldiers are practicing how to blockade the island. So how is Taiwan defending itself? This is what their president, Tsai Ing-wen, said today.
I would like to emphasize that we will not escalate conflicts or provoke disputes, but we will firmly defend our sovereignty and national security and stick to the line of defense of democracy and freedom. We are calm and not impetuous. We are rational and not provocative, but we will also be firm and not shrink.
Taiwan needs a long-term plan to deal with the PLA. Nancy Pelosi's visit has precipitated the crisis for this island. Taiwan calls itself an independent and sovereign state, but China disagrees. It calls Taiwan a breakaway province, a province that China must control using force if needed. And Nancy Pelosi is not done yet. She's weighing in on the fallout of her visit.
We have said from the start that our representation here is not about changing the status quo here in Asia, changing status quo in Taiwan. It's about, again, the Taiwan Relations Act, the U.S.-China policy, all of the pieces of legislation and agreements that have established what our relationship is, to have peace in the Taiwan Straits and to have the status quo prevail.
But the status quo has changed. If Pelosi was not convinced earlier, maybe this will change her mind. China has sanctioned Nancy Pelosi and her family. They can no longer visit China, Hong Kong or Macau, and they cannot do business with China. And that's not all. China has also launched a comprehensive diplomatic response against the US. And it is calling them the 8 countermeasures. What are these countermeasures? Let's tell you. 3 important defense dialogues have been suspended. The China-US Theatre Commanders Dialogue, the Defense Policy Coordination Talks, and meetings for a military maritime agreement. What else? Cooperation on 5 key issues stands suspended. Repatriation of illegal immigrants, legal assistance in criminal matters, transnational crimes, counter-narcotics cooperation and climate change. China will no longer work with the US on any of these matters. This is heading towards a complete breakdown in the relationship. Beijing has effectively ended dialogue with Washington, D.C. How does the US see these moves? US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called China's actions, quote-unquote, a significant escalation.
The fact is, the speaker's visit was peaceful. There is no justification for this extreme, disproportionate, and escalatory military response. Let me say again that nothing has changed about our One China policy, which is guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 communiques, and the 6 assurances.
Blinken may try his best to spin it. Beijing is not buying any of it. It seems prepared to fight with everyone over Taiwan. Let's tell you what happened with Japan today. Japan protested the Chinese drills. Their Prime Minister Fumio Kishida called on Beijing to stop immediately. Here's what the Chinese wolf warriors said.
The Japanese government, your leaders have recently behaved very badly over the Taiwan issue, causing great discontent among the Chinese people. As we have already said, Japan bears a serious historical responsibility on the Taiwan issue, and Japan is not qualified to say anything to China over the Taiwan issue.
Japan is behaving very badly, she said. What should they do then? Allow Chinese missiles to blow them up? China has turned the Taiwan Strait into a war zone. This region is an important trade link for the world. 22% of global trade passes through here. But the PLA has shut everything down. Since Wednesday, 70 flights from Taiwan have been cancelled. Several ships are being forced to sail around the danger zone. And the risk is this. This disruption could be permanent. Experts say these drills are a peek into the future, a preview of what could happen if China decides to invade Taiwan. In fact, I have a statement from Major General Meng Xiangqing. He's a professor at the PLA National Defense University in Beijing, and here is how he described the drills near Taiwan. I'm quoting, "This establishes an encirclement of Taiwan Island. This creates very good conditions for reshaping the strategic situation in a way that benefits unification." So that could be China's endgame. Beijing wants to force Taiwan into submission through relentless coercion. And talking about coercion, the Russian government could be trying to extract significant concessions from the US through a basketball player. 6 months ago, Russia had arrested Brittany Griner. She's an American basketball star. She has been found guilty of smuggling and sentenced to 9 years in jail. Now, the Biden administration is under pressure to ensure her release. Washington has offered a prisoner swap deal to the Kremlin. Will Vladimir Putin accept Biden's offer? Here's a report.
It was at this moment Brittany Griner's fate was sealed.
The court has stated by accumulation of crimes to impose an imprisonment for 9 years and a fine at a rate of 1 million rubles or $16,000. The punishment is to be served in general regime penal colony.
Greiner will spend 9 years in a Russian prison camp, unless Moscow accepts a prisoner swap offer from Washington, in which case Greiner may walk free.
As you all know, we have made a substantial offer to bring her and Paul Whelan home. We urge Russia to accept that proposal.
Will the Kremlin accept? Russia has agreed to discuss America's proposal. But no one knows which way Moscow is leaning. Russia is in a position to demand more because of Greiner's high-profile status. She is a women's NBA champion and a 2-time Olympic gold medalist in basketball. Greiner was detained way back in February this year at the Moscow airport. She was in Russia to play for a basketball team. But when Greiner passed through a customs check, her life turned upside down. Vape canisters containing cannabis oil were found from her luggage. Russian officials charged Greiner with smuggling. Last month, the basketball star pleaded guilty in court.
My parents taught me 2 important things. 1, take ownership for your responsibilities, and 2, to work hard for everything that you have. That's why I pled guilty to my charges. I understand everything that's being said against me, the charges that are against me, and that is why I pled guilty. But I had no intent to break any Russian laws.
U.S. President Joe Biden called Greiner's conviction unacceptable. The State Department has termed her detention as wrong. But the American government doesn't have many options. Only a prisoner swap can ensure Greiner's release. The White House was prompt in putting an offer on the table. The details haven't been made public, but America can offer some high-profile Russian prisoners for exchange. One of them is Victor Bout. He is a 55-year-old arms trafficker. The world knows him as the Merchant of Death. Bout is serving a 25-year-long jail term in America. Another name on the list is Vladislav Klyushin. He was a Kremlin insider. Klyushin was extradited from Switzerland in 2021 on insider trading charges. It all comes down to which deal will be acceptable to Vladimir Putin.
As specifically on the issue of persons convicted in Russia and in the US, I have already said that there is the special channel that was agreed by the presidents. Whatever might be said publicly, this channel is still relevant.
The war in Ukraine destroyed the US-Russia relationship. America and Russia have snapped diplomatic ties. But talks for a prisoner swap have created an opening for some diplomacy. This leads to the question, is Brittany Griner being used as a hostage? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now let's talk about what's happening in India. Higher energy costs are driving up food and fuel prices, just like the rest of the world. Inflation is not showing any signs of letting up. So earlier today, the Reserve Bank of India, India's central bank, intervened. They hiked key lending rates once again. By how much? 50 basis points, or 0.5%. The RBI's new lending rate is 5.4%. What does this mean for you, the consumer? Your loans will become more expensive. Your EMIs will be higher. Basically, borrowing money will now cost you more. And that's precisely the idea behind increasing lending rates. If credit is more expensive, people will take less loans. You see, less loans equals less spending, and less spending equals less inflation. That is the logic behind increasing interest rates. And this is the third interest hike by India's central bank. The first was in the month of May. Interest rates were increased by 40 basis points. The second was in June. Interest rates were hiked by 50 basis points. Analysts were expecting another hike in August. The question was by how much? They were split between 25 and 50 basis points. As it turned out, the RBI opted for the more aggressive option, 50. RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das emphasized on bringing inflation down to 4%. Listen to this.
In such a milieu, with growth momentum expected to be resilient despite headwinds from the external sector, monetary policy should persevere further in its stance of withdrawal of accommodation to ensure that inflation moves close to the target of 4% over the medium term, while, of course, supporting growth.
The problem is the RBI has multiple things to consider. Number one is inflation, of course. India's retail inflation was at 7.03% in June. The ideal level is around 4%. But getting there will likely be a long journey. The RBI is expecting inflation to be above 6% in the next quarter as well. So a rate hike was inevitable. Factor number two is the rupee. The RBI has been selling reserves to prop up the Indian currency. And to some extent it has worked. Last month the dollar had breached 80 against the rupee. So $1 was for more than 80 rupees. But now it's back around 79. Does that mean the rupee has recovered? Unfortunately, no, it hasn't. But it does mean that the slide has been stopped temporarily. And factor number three is growth. You see, credit is the engine of economic growth. Cheap credit is the engine. Businesses take out loans to expand. Consumers take out loans to buy stuff. So every growing economy needs cheap credit. But if the interest rates keep increasing, that will not happen. Economic growth could be throttled. So the RBI basically must balance these three problems simultaneously: rising inflation, falling rupee, and stagnating growth. And that last one is a worry across the world: stagnating growth. The International Monetary Fund has revised growth estimates for most countries. Let me show you the data. The IMF's initial forecast for India was 8.2%. The new estimate is 7.4%. The American projection is down to 2.3% from 3.7%. And China is down from 4.4% to 3.3%. So compared to other big economies, India is still doing well. Sort of like a bright spot. In fact, India has the fourth highest forex reserves in the world, almost $570 billion. That is enough to cover imports for almost 12 months. Having said that, outside factors can still play spoilsport. First, the war in Ukraine, and now the tensions in the Taiwan Strait. Both factors are driving inflation in India. The matter reached India's parliament this week. Opposition lawmakers clad in black marched to the presidential palace in New Delhi. Dozens of them were detained by the police. So the pressure is building on the government, not just here in India, but all over the world. They're under pressure to ease the cost of living crisis. At the same time, they can't afford to spend too much, because if they do, it will make inflation worse. So right now, India's economic future is firmly linked to the global situation. If Russia cuts gas supply to Europe, India will suffer. Energy prices will skyrocket, and chances are there will be shortages in the Asian market. And that's the thing about bright spots. You may be shining alone, but eventually the darkness around you becomes overwhelming. Our next story is from Hong Kong. Its chief executive is making headlines globally. John Lee has joined the club of the world's highest paid political leaders. The city-state chose to reward Lee at a time when Hong Kong slumped into its second recession in 3 years. Lee now earns more than US President Joe Biden. Here are some numbers.
Remember John Lee, Hong Kong's new leader? Well, the word is that Lee is minting money. He is being paid $58,000 a month. That's almost 46 lakhs. There's entertainment allowance over and above this sum. Any idea how much? $10,000 a month. That makes his monthly take-home salary $68,000. Multiply that by 12, and this is his annual package, $816,000. Don't forget to count the zeros. That's 6.4 crore rupees a year. If you thought you had to become a CEO or an entrepreneur to earn that kind of money, you may want to rethink and brush up your oratory skills. Because politics can be lucrative, both legally and... Why don't you complete that sentence? In exchange, we will tell you who the world's highest paid political leader is. It's not John Lee. He is, in fact, second on the list. Lee Hsien Loong is first. He is the Prime Minister of Singapore. Loong draws an annual salary of $1.6 million. That's around 12.6 crore rupees. We are not making this number up. It's pasted on the government website. Unlike Singapore, the US does not like disclosing its leader's salary. Thanks to this unnecessary financial ambiguity, we can't say for sure how much US President Joe Biden really earns. Reports say he is paid $400,000 a year, plus there are allowances, which take the total to $564,000 a year. You know the amazing bit? Biden does not need to spend a penny. He has the White House, a $100,000 redecorating allowance to turn the 132-room mansion into home. There are 100 resident maids, cooks, plumber, florist, and housekeepers, and Biden does not need to pay their salaries. He also gets a country home, a personal plane, a chopper, a fleet of cars, health insurance, and a pension. Most world leaders enjoy such elaborate perks while at office. While many in the private sector earn more than these leaders, they don't enjoy such perks and must pay for most goods and services. What about world leaders? Where does their salary go? The Swiss president makes tiny withdrawals to pay his TV and radio bills. This is Ignazio Cassis. He is the president of Switzerland. He is paid nearly $670,000 a year. But Switzerland does not cover a president's TV and radio bills. The leader must make the payments. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is highly paid too. He receives nearly $392,000 every year. How much does the Indian Prime Minister make? Somewhere around 160,000 rupees a month, which is 1,920,000 rupees or $24,168 a year. Some of these numbers would have upset George Washington. When Washington became US president, he announced that he would forego his salary. Why? Sense of duty, he replied. Washington said he wanted to serve the country without pay. Congress didn't allow him to do so. What if it had? It may have set a precedent. How many leaders today would have served their country without pay? There is one country where the leader does not draw any salary. That country is the Vatican, and that leader is the Pope. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
I know it's almost the weekend, but I have a pretty deep question for you. How do you define death? When do you say someone or something has died? Is it when the brain stops working? Or when the heart stops pumping? Or when your lungs stop breathing? Doctors are split over how to define death. Especially nowadays, with these fancy machines, people can live on life support for years, even decades. But that's delaying death. We can't really call it life. So coming back to my first question, when do you say someone is dead? A simple answer would be this: when their bodily organs stop functioning. One example is cardiac arrest. It occurs when your body stops circulating blood and oxygen. Usually when that happens, doctors try to revive you. They try CPR or a defibrillator. And if that fails, they may call time of death. They declare the patient dead. But what if I told you that that's not the end? What if bodily organs can recover after clinical death? That's what one experiment has shown. One experiment done by scientists at Yale discovered this. And before you get excited, we're not talking about human organs. This experiment was done on pigs. Let me explain how they did it. First, the pigs were observed for 3 days just to make sure everything was normal. After that, they were sedated and put on a ventilator. Why? To induce a cardiac arrest. To put it crudely, to kill them. The researchers checked to see if the pigs had any pulse. After that, they were taken off the ventilator. First stage complete. 1 hour later, the second stage began. The ventilators were turned back on. Some of the pigs were attached to a special compound called Organ X. Now, what does this compound include? The pig's blood and 13 other substances, including anticoagulants. Organ X had a very specific job. The job was to prevent decomposition and restart circulation. And guess what? It worked. 6 hours later, circulation had restarted in the dead pigs. Oxygen was flowing to all tissues. The heart was contracting again, and the liver was producing more proteins. Now, just to be clear, this does not mean that the pigs came back to life. This is not reanimation. This only means that the metabolism restarted. The question is how? Organs start decomposing immediately after death. Without oxygen, the cells break down. They become incapable of working again. So how did these animal cells restart 6 hours after death? Because of organ X. This compound managed to preserve the pig organs even after death. In fact, it jolted them back into action. Does that mean it is possible to bring the animal back from the dead? Based on this experiment, no. In fact, the researchers found no electrical signals in the brain. They say this study is not clinically relevant. So reanimation is out of the question. Having said that, it does trigger a moral debate. What if future studies can also restore brain function? What if brain death can be reversed too? That would change our entire understanding of death. It would also make some medical processes complicated, like pulling the plug. You might remember the story of Archie Battersby. We told you about him on Wednesday. He is a 12-year-old British boy currently in a coma. The doctors in Britain have declared him brain dead. They want to end his life support, but his family is fighting to prevent that. They believe Archie will pull through. And such studies give families like this more hope. Same with organ donations. If organs can be revived after death, where does that leave donations? Why would anybody donate anymore? I know these questions sound encouraging. It seems like we are close to reversing or at least delaying death. But right now, we are far from that stage. Doctors say these experiments must be explored further before they have any clinical implication. So reversing death is not the takeaway. Then what is? This experiment shows that death is not a moment. It is a process. You can't say death happened because of one particular reason or at one particular moment. It is a long and continuous process, which means defining death will become harder in the future for medical purposes, for legal purposes. The definition of death will change as medicine advances. As far as headaches go, it's a good one to have, we say. With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
From our studios